Hey everyone, it's me Triton, and I have an extra special video for you all today. For the last 5 months, I've gone back and forth trying to meticulously craft a narrative that spoke to my time in Destiny 1. As it turns out, what I wanted to reflect on the most was staring me right in the face. While my journey to become legend has seen me as a proud member of the Dads of Destiny PS4 Eastern Standard Time to being the first leader of Safe Gamers, joining Resolute in January of 2016 set me down a path that I still travel to this day. And for a little more than a year now, my fire team, aka REZOcast, has consisted of Lego LaFlash and Hove76. And with the convenient switch in D2 to 4v4 in Crucible, the Manigator is also part of that fire team now. So, considering the actual game footage you're watching, I'm going to give you all an exclusive behind-the-scenes snapshot of REZOcast. Keeping with the general format, this would be the time to elaborate on my place in a Destiny community. But honestly, not even Plonk units could measure my insignificance, but I suppose if you prescribe to the belief that the Destiny community is an aggregate of many sub-communities that are constantly in flux, and time, as it's perceived by the individuals within those sub-communities, moves at varying degrees, then I suppose in that case, at best, I am just another part of the fabric of the Destiny community at large, but I digress. Instead, let's jump right into some hard-hitting, self-generated community questions. So, when I think about what is on the minds of our viewers the most that hasn't been directly addressed, a few things come to mind. Is Mindy real? Do I or have I ever lived with Hove? And does he leave the seat up? And the respective answers are no, no, and maybe. And that pretty much sums up my relationship with Hove. But seriously, right before our 50th episode, I seized control of the REZOcast Twitter account and asked our followers what they recall the most about the hosts in our first year together. Nearly all of the replies correlated with one of the many inside jokes we have or the back and forth nature of our trolling. The fact that Hove and I share the same Steel City ethos is such a luxury, and that I feel we can both push each other's buttons more than someone else, knowing that things aren't misinterpreted over text or audio with no visual context. And I think that's made manifest on the podcast, and I'm glad those are the memories that have stuck with some of our audience. Okay, next question. Triton, do you ever talk on the podcast? Okay, so there is certainly some validity to that question. I do often err on the side of waiting for a clear opening rather than risk interrupting or talking over someone, which results in Hove prodding me for a response at some point, but there's a little bit more to that. While I'm going to stop short of suggesting that I ask good questions on the podcast, the questions I do ask often elicit longer responses that prompts the other host to chime in, and I often enjoy soaking in their thoughts and opinions to a fault. But there have been some other times that it completely subverts the current flow of the podcast, and I'm also pretty cognizant of that. For example, on our episode with Slayer Edge, after I asked him about common hurdles that prevent other players from taking on the challenges of soloing endgame content, I really wanted to ask him to expound upon the differences in building a community based on personal challenges that few are willing to take on themselves versus communities built around direct in-game interaction with their audiences like trials or raid help. While I would have loved to go down the rabbit hole on that one, it probably would have been 20 to 30 minutes of unique conversation in the wrong direction. We were already at the 50-minute mark and hadn't yet covered Trials of the Nine or the TWAB. Not the best time to regress back to community-focused questions. Additionally, sometimes I know if I tried leading a conversation about one of my peculiar interests, we'd lose all of our followers and Lego would fire me. It's exactly why I didn't ask on our podcast where we talked about faction wars if anyone thought the order in which one speaks to the three faction leaders directly influenced the casual player's choice. If you haven't heard, Destiny 2 keeps the casual player in mind, and perhaps that player doesn't want to run back across the tower after visiting New Monarchy to pick Dead Orbit or Future War Cult. For me, even before Executor Hideo had finished his dissertation, I conjectured that a majority of casual players would elect him out of convenience sake, and on that premise, they were the safest pick to win the faction wars. But I had barely finished that thought before the Pareto principle came to mind, and while I believed more players would choose New Monarchy, I also felt the passionate players would ultimately do most of the work, i.e. Dead Orbit fanatics. Then my mind went to if the 80-20 was the appropriate allocation for this or not, and if winning on the margins would still carry New Monarchy to victory regardless. That line of thought is hardly entertaining, and just not a good topic of conversation for the podcast. Now, with all that said, while I hate to take away what is, at this point, equal parts a running joke and nested observation, I do and will continue to work on offering up my opinion more freely in year 2 of REZOcast. But since this isn't REZOcast, maybe you'd like to hear about some of the peculiar topics that do interest me about Destiny and the community. Well, let's see. Nothing fascinates me more than how cognitive dissonance plays out in a community largely driven by text-based communication with a myriad of demographics that converge on a social media platform that has character limits, aka Twitter. Who else was excited to see that Destiny Tracker incorporated margin of victory in defeat into their ELO calculation that was a modified version of Nate Silver's? I was. I now desperately want to know what modifications they use and if they've ever dabbled into predictive analytics for speculative and future matchmaking purposes given their vast archives of data. Okay, I am just brimming with rhetorical questions about matchmaking, and I'd love to talk to someone on Bungie's PvP matchmaking team to see how they derive the percentage weights that they assign to connection versus skill. How is skill defined? If they don't use pace-adjusted stats in that aggregation, why not? Are there any measures that are leading indicators for a player's future success? Like, does a high assist rate in the first 10 hours of play generally lead to a rise in overall KD in the next 10? Can map awareness be quantified and become actionable data in creating engagements between similarly skilled opponents? Man, matchmaking and how it works is one of the topics that fascinates me the most about Destiny in general. So, last question, and I'm going to wrap it up here. Where do I hope REZOcast will go in year 2? Well, I love to participate in a podcast panel somewhere, have an opportunity to meet people directly responsible for the game we all love, perhaps a community focus, and if Hove isn't a partner and streamer by the end of 2018, I'm going to lose it. But seriously, when you see all the hard work and dedication and passion that Lego, Hove, and Mana have for our podcast and the Destiny community, you can't help but hope they are recognized for it in some way. It's not something they'll ever ask for, but I personally feel it's something they deserve. And that, my friends, concludes this 30 for 30 behind-the-scenes look into REZOcast. And hey, that was 8 minutes of me continually talking for a change. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting me, for supporting REZOcast. I'm still not sure what the future holds for my channel or when I'll start streaming consistently again, but I do promise to be back in some fashion in the near future.
You guys weak by me on my orb.
I got crafty.
He's very weak. Very weak on me. Very weak on me. Nice. Good stuff,
good plays,
guys.
boys.
Good plays. That was crazy. We were all on our last thing.
Falcon, this isn't a sweaty game though? No, it's not, but it's still fun to play people you know.
Yeah.
I mean, not know, like we don't
Yeah,
know,
like,
we
know
don't know
of.
them, but like we know of them.
Okay, they all have something. This room is just not conducive.
I got him.
There we go.
Got it. So I